what we're doing with our program, strength deficit, right? This is the idea that when you have different types of strength, like speed strength versus absolute strength, you know, absolute strength is your idea of like, what's your 1 rep max, right? Versus, you know, how strong you can be while you're being explosive, for example, like in a power clean or a vertical jump or something along those lines, and comparing the difference between kind of your slow strength or your speed strength and looking at where do you need to intervene, right? We know that rate of force development is really important for athletes, and then you come back to the regular population. How big of an issue is this really, right? We know that they're important things, but how specific do you really need to get if your goal isn't to have, you know, a 10-inch increase in your vertical? But knowing this, that we have the difference between speed strength and acceleration strength and all of these different things allows us to do a better job with our evaluation-based programming to get people results. And also thinking about kind of not, you know, I always think about muscle confusion from the P90X. I always think that it's funny to think about that. But when we're looking at conjugate periodization around, we want to be able to mix it up and take people through different modalities and different stimuli to their body to get changes in the adaptations that we're looking for. So you can play around with these different types of you know, ideas with strength deficit and work on different ways to improve that. Again, it's a big issue with injury prevention as well, changing up basically the speed and the idea of how you're recruiting, you know, the muscle tension that you're creating. Bilateral deficit is most people basically are going to create less force when they use 2 hands, for example, on a barbell exercise, or 2 legs on a squat, versus doing a 1-arm or 1-legged squatting or pushing or pulling position. You're actually going to create more force and more torque by using 1 arm versus 2 arms. Now, again, this isn't like, hey, throw the baby out with the bathwater type of situation. It's just understanding that, you know, you want to use these different techniques and modalities to be able to get the best and the most out of the situation, right? So, and ultimately, you know, doing unilateral things is going to be more functional as well. The crossover effect is something that I think we typically are seeing an issue with in physical therapy more than anything, where, you know, if somebody has a right knee injury, we typically only train the right leg, especially when we only have an hour to do things, and we're not working on the left side, which also the literature is showing that we see injuries on the left side in high volume after, or high prevalence after certain injuries, primarily ACL tears, like we talked about that before. So making sure that we're paying attention to both sides, and also understanding that there's this crossover effect is a neurological phenomenon that one side of the body helps to teach the other side of the body how to perform and execute a technique better. It's almost kind of like the idea of mirror neurons, where we're able to see and mirror somebody doing something and we're able to mimic that. Kind of the body has the same ability when we practice with one side of the body versus the other. So we always want to do that. I know that's more common in training, but also looking at, are you going to do their weak side or their good side first, right? So that's something to think about. Typically, I always like to do the good side first because it helps to teach the weak side. But it's also good to mix that up because then you get used to doing the same side all the time, right? So, and especially with unilateral exercises, you can create some fatigue on the one side that carries over to the other side, and you may not be getting the best, you know, output there. Another thing to think about with that is, which I really think about a lot, and I still never do this. I know that I have a weakness on one side of my body versus the other, but yet I still continue to use the same weight all the time whenever I'm doing unilateral stuff, right? If I'm doing something with a 90-pound dumbbell on my right side, I do the 90-pound dumbbell on my left side. I've never changed this. I don't know if I will. I don't know if I recommend it or not, but it's just something to think about, because, you know, are we going to create, if I'm weaker on one side, am I going to create more compensations by trying to use the same resistance on the other side? So the answer would be ultimately have to be yes. Otherwise, you're not really using the correct weight. Does that make sense? Right? If my right side's my strong side and I'm using 90 and my left side's my weak side and I'm using 90, well, then that probably means that my right side could probably do more, or I'm compensating on my left side to do the same amount of weight as on my right side. Does that make sense? I know that's a circle talk, convoluted type of thing. Does everybody get that? Yep, cool. All right, so and another thing that and I think about this all the time when I got into the Marinovich stuff, and as I was coming through at this time, the idea was like maximum recruitment, maximum speed, maximum power, maximum explosiveness, right? And it's not really what we see in function, you know, especially in sports performance. It's really about efficiency, right? It's really about optimization, right? And adaptation and giving the body the correct stimulus so we can have momentum and inertia and continue to perform over time. If all we do is maximum everything, eventually we're going to redline. You can't keep the body in this emergency situation in fight or flight. That doesn't mean that we can't program some of that into our workouts every time, but it's probably not the best idea for looking at trying to program things for the long term. All right. So